Hello guys, how you doing? So chapter 3 today of Reality Atlas. Um, let's just jump straight in. How are you today, Scott?
I'm doing well. So this chapter is called Collision with the Dominant Paradigm. And if we look,
Collision with the dominant
I want to
paradigm.
give it some context for
Great.
coming from the previous chapter. So at the end of chapter 2, I want to read this quote from that chapter to kind of prime us for what we're doing here.
Nice.
So in chapter 2, I said, there exists another domain which is populated by geometry and mathematical entities, which are non-spatial and non-temporal, immaterial in nature. Amazingly, consciousness has the capability of accessing this universally intelligible domain. So I'm positing the thesis of that chapter is that there is a separate domain. Inescapably, there's a separate domain for mathematical and geometric entities. And that is really at odds with the dominant paradigm under which we all live in this world today in every country in the world. And so what I'm doing in this chapter 3 is showing how these ideas kind of collide with the assumptions that we all tend to take for granted without, a lot of us maybe haven't really examined the assumptions that are in the dominant paradigm because they're just kind of the operating system that we inherit from mother culture today.
Yes.
And so what I'm trying to do is pull them out and show you like, wait a minute, this is one of the aspects of that culture. And,
I totally get it.
And kind of get you to think about it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, in a way, you could say that this chapter 3, it's like, there's almost like a funny irony to it, because in order for you to set the stage for the rest of the book, you're kind of calling out the sort of the central values of the belief system of the dominant paradigm. So could I say that chapter 3 essentially are like the principles that are operative in the way people see the world in mainstream culture today that you and I, broadly speaking, would not subscribe to or would disagree with? Is that a fair frame for this chapter?
Yeah, so this chapter is largely just about exposing those, some of those aspects, just a few of random ones.
Yeah.
And then in the whole second part of the book, which is the next 3 chapters, we're going to go into the whole framework that I'm laying out about a new way of looking at all of this.
Exactly.
So we're not going to explain all of that here. We're just going to point out some of the assumptions of the dominant paradigm. And so the first one is the universe is independent of consciousness. So the idea is consciousness is something that's considered to be an epiphenomenon that happens in the neurons, and that there's theorists that go so far as to claim that consciousness is some kind of an illusion. There's a stance called delusionism, which is in materialism, and it says just that maybe we're not even conscious. Because we don't really see evidence of that in the world. Consciousness seems to be a trivial
byproduct of brain activity.
Right, and it's not even, it has no bearing on the universe, which is out there separate from us. Okay, and that's kind of the normal assumption, right?
Yeah.
But I'll just pull out one fact that will hopefully get you to think about this in another way, which is the laws of physics, right? The laws of physics, like the law of gravitation or E = mc squared, or any of those physics theories are all ideas. I think we could agree that all of those physics formulas are ideas that exist in consciousness. And the truth is that those ideas were there before human minds existed, because they govern the interaction of the total mass energy of the universe. So they were there for billions of years, and they're presumably going to be there for billions of years after humans are gone. And so we can't claim to have really invented those ideas. Rather, it's more like a discovery that we've come up with these ideas and we discover the ideas which govern the universe. But if the universe is made of matter and energy, or dark matter and dark energy, or both, where do those ideas exist? In whose mind, in what consciousness do those ideas exist? Because they're not part of mass or energy. Where are they? And I think this is something that's overlooked by physics. Like, where are those theories? Where are those laws? If we've discovered them and they were already there, but they're definitely ideas. And they're elegant mathematical ideas too.
I struggle a little bit with that, Scott, so just for the sake of our viewers, like, let's dive into this one a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, like, I love the principle of gravity because I can understand that one, right? So if I drop a hammer on my toe, it's going to be sore, and arguably somebody living, tens of thousands of years ago dropped something heavy on their toe, they're going to feel it as well. So the principle of gravity exists, across all times and all cultures, right? I kind of get that.
Yeah.
But the idea of gravity as an idea in consciousness, I can kind of sense what you're saying.
You're expressing gravity as like I drop a rock and it falls on the ground, and you're saying that's gravity. But what I'm saying is that that's actually, gravity is the product of the masses times a constant divided by the distance between them squared.
Okay.
So that's gotcha. The formula for gravity that Isaac Newton came up with.
Okay.
And so gravity is a mathematical idea.
Is that why my toe is sore?
No, but that's a way of understanding.
After I dropped the hammer on it,
why the mass the mass of the hammer was attracted to the larger mass of the earth, and how fast it fell, and all this stuff is all expressed in that idea.
Yeah. But I don't want to get in the way of.
It's a very precise, elegant mathematical idea.
Yeah.
It governs that interaction. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that idea was there before humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, whose idea is that?
Yeah. And I suppose semantics as well, like, can kind of get in the way as well, like, as in, I would sort of think of that as something like principles of existence, like, as in, I don't know, is it similar to if you have like the golden ratio organizing our DNA, for example, spatially, like that's something that's existed since the beginning of time, like, and I would call that a principle of existence, Well, would you call that an idea?
You're taking that sort of as a given, but it didn't have to necessarily be that way. That was a choice. Mm-hmm. That is an idea. That's evidence of an idea.
I get you. Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
So the creative principle itself at some stage had to decide, this is how we're going to make DNA.
Yeah, it's actually very mind-blowing and miraculous when you realize how much golden ratio is in DNA.
Yeah,
and
I know.
I think that we would probably agree that it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but it is. And it's a beautiful thing. And
I kind of get it. You're helping me out a bit. It's like, so somewhere in the evolution of the whole trip of reality, the idea of forming DNA that way was created. It came into existence.
It's evidence of consciousness. It's evidence of an idea.
Okay, I get you. I can go with that.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Let me get out of your way.
So that's kind of what I'm trying to say with there's another way of looking at this, the assumption that the universe is independent of consciousness. In fact, also in quantum physics, we know that's not true, because the act of observation changes what the outcome in the double slit experiment.
I love that one.
And so consciousness is definitely part of the universe. It's not an epiphenomenon that's independent of it. In fact, Max Planck, who is the founder of quantum physics, said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. And so what's amazing is he really got it, and he really understood that. But that remains controversial today, I would say, and even in physics. That's that's considered to be kind of a radical view.
Mm.
But
It's
that's
funny
the next,
because
we're kind of
that,
getting into the next issue, which is consciousness is a hard problem.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
this is what I think it was David Chalmers was the first to say that, if I remember right, that consciousness is a hard problem because we can't explain it. We can't,
Mm-hmm.
like in the dominant paradigm, it doesn't really make sense that inanimate, unconscious parts could somehow assemble in such a way as to develop consciousness.
Mm.
And they just call that a hard problem, and they call it emergence. Like, and I don't really buy that at all. I think even in principle, that doesn't make any sense, that you put a lot of complexity in a bucket and stir it up, and all of a sudden you have a point of view coming out and saying, hey, how you doing?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like,
I
wait,
get you.
but we kind of assume that because that's our own experience, right? We have these complicated brains, and yet we do have an interior first person perspective. It's like, I can tell you what it's like. I can say, hey, I have an interior.
Yeah.
And I'm not just a bunch of parts.
Yeah.
You know, it reminds me of Leibniz, the mathematician, said something like imagine the brain is like a mill, and you go inside the mill and you enlarge the mill, and you can imagine you see all these girders and wooden posts and beams and stuff and pushing on each other, but there's nothing in there that would explain a perception.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, you can never,
yeah.
just, if you have more wooden beams, where does the person who experiences come from?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
I get you. So is the hard problem, Scott, kind of this a convenience for modern science, you know, that like it's sort of like at the moment, if I'm not a scientist, right? So I don't know, but I get the idea that like at the moment, the current scientific machinery is unable to, for example, explain what consciousness is and how it originates. You know, they're unable to give a satisfactory answer for that. So in the interim period, what they've decided to do is say, until we're able to work this out, we're going to give it this label called the hard problem, you know, and then someday maybe when we get good enough with our science, then we will give you an answer. But until then, we'll just have to go back to sleep, America, and, you know, we'll trust science will deliver it. I remember reading Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. And I really liked, by the way, 80%, 90% of that book I thought was excellent, you know. But then at the end, he kind of made that claim that just because something can't be explained now doesn't mean that it can't be explained by science, and that you just kind of have to have patience or something. And it didn't really fit with me, to be honest. It's like
it's a promissory
someday
note.
maybe.
It's like saying, well, you know what, we don't know now, but maybe we will later. But it doesn't really examine the fact that isn't something that can ever be figured out, even in principle. And some of the more intelligent materialists have even pointed that out and said, wait a minute, no matter how much we know about the brain, we're never going to find the little homunculus inside that is the person that's aware. You know, no matter how many parts and pathways for electrons that you find, you're not going to ever find something that explains where the first person perspective is actually coming from. And I don't think that the current pathway in science will ever figure that out. And so therefore it's a promissory note. It's like, maybe in the future we'll do that, but let's not talk about that now. Let's think about something else.
And that's what the hard problem is, the hard problem of consciousness.
Exactly,
it's a great name. It's a great name for it. There's a lot of hard problems for me in physics, you know, so I'm like, I won't get off track. No, you keep going. I was going to talk about cipher in the matrix and the stake, you know. It's like, no matter how much you look in the brain and you see all these like 86 billion neurons firing, you know, you're never going to be able to sort of explain the taste of steak. Is it that? Am I off track with that? Or?
Yeah, exactly right. You're never gonna get into the interior. because you're
yeah,
just looking at exteriors. And if you're just looking
yeah,
at brain tissues and you just see all these structures, you would probably conclude that consciousness must be an illusion because you can't find it there.
yeah,
But you're
yeah,
denying your own experience. You're
yeah.
denying your own lived experience of being aware.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm saying is that we have it all inside out and backwards, basically.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. All right. Let's
Okay,
keep
so
going.
and the next point in the chapter is you only have one life to live.
Oh, I love this one. Yeah.
Okay, you'd probably agree off the top of your head. Yeah, you're right. I only have one life to live. Let's make the most of
Yeah.
it.
You only live once, as the
Only
saying
live
goes.
once.
Yeah.
But when you look at a lot of things, they suggest that there's more to reality than we assume. So, for
Mm.
example, take the idea of brain death, right, which is used as an indicator of legal death in most jurisdictions. When your brain
Mm-hmm.
dies, you're dead.
Yeah.
But we know from near-death experiences of people in the hospital whose brains are hooked up to machines and they register no brain activity and they're dead. They can actually, in some rare cases, come back from being dead and report rich, phenomenal experiences that they had in this so-called near-death experience that happened while
Fascinating.
their brain registered no activity.
Yeah.
So that's a phenomenon. There's a rich literature about that, and there's a book that's very good. I recommend by Ibn Alexander, who was, I think
Uh-huh.
he's a neurosurgeon who wrote about that when he had an NDE. So that's one class of phenomenon that one can look into about that. Another is reincarnation, the idea of the continuity of your soul after you die. And, that's something that has been in religion for a long time. But there's also communication that talented mediums can have with souls of our dearly departed.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, sometimes with the right person, you can actually talk to your deceased relatives and they can tell you things, and it's kind of amazing. So that's something that we write off because we assume that we only have one life to live. And so this must be a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also write off the thousands of years of accumulated wisdom from nearly every religion and spiritual tradition, which typically has a lot to say about consciousness continuing after death.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we also write off altered states of consciousness in which people experience phenomenal reality outside the human body. So we have to write off NDEs, reincarnation, communication with mediums, all religions. We have to write off, if you took LSD or some kind of experience like that, where you saw beyond the human body, and you have to write off all of that to believe that you only have one life to live.
Yeah. And you're claiming that that's a core value of our kind of modern worldview, essentially. It's just like, you're attached to the body, consciousness somehow is trapped inside your skin. And when the body dies, so does consciousness. Boom. It's over. Forget about it. Nothing to see here.
Exactly.
Yeah. And now I know you and I disagree with that view, but we're just calling these out in terms of they are in the atmosphere of our modern culture.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you.
We're
on
all
that.
aware
Yeah.
of those things, but
Yeah.
but what I'm trying to do here is trying to get you to revisit the notion that you only have one life to live might not actually be the case.
Yeah. I remember seeing a guy, Raymond Moody, in a conference in Prague, and he's dedicated his entire life really to the study of near-death experiences, and he was an incredibly compelling speaker. I was really taken by his sharing.
But all of these different people that study these areas can be classified as woo-woo.
Yeah.
Because that's a way of denigrating anything that doesn't fit the dominant paradigm.
Yeah. And you see, I'm definitely like, I have a warmness to that type of disposition. The other guy that spoke at that same conference was Christopher Bash, who I know you really like as well. And he speaks a lot, very eloquently, on the kind of non-ordinary states, you could call them, or expanded states of consciousness,
Yeah.
And again, deeply compelling presentations, you know, that intuitively just felt right to me, you know.
I think
really,
most of us have explored these areas and we're fascinated by them. But we also recognize that they are considered woo-woo, out there on a limb.
yeah,
And when you feel that way, it's because they're going against the dominant paradigm. And that's never very
yeah,
comfortable, because that's the assumption that our culture
yeah.
gives us.
And yet you're feeling these things and experiencing these things. So you're in this kind of like contradicted state almost, where you're like, oh, well, maybe that's just nonsense, but I really feel this. So you sort of have to trust yourself in a new way to kind of say, well, I'll just leave the dominant paradigm on the shelf there, and I'll trust myself to sort of just go into what's meaningful for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's another aspect. And then moving on, the next one is everything is relative.
Yeah.
And this is the idea that it's pretty much led by intellectuals, starting with universities in the 20th century with the idea of postmodernism. And it's the claim that everything is relative. And that means that my truth, it may only be my truth, and your truth is a different truth. And all of our ideas are relative to our own lives. And the proclamation that everything is relative is itself a performative contradiction, because it's claiming that absolutely to be absolutely true.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah, I
See,
know what
so
you're saying.
it's a contradiction, and it's kind of this weird, like system error that you get when you
Yeah.
believe firmly that everything is relative. And we see that a lot today in the extreme left on the political spectrum of people that are claiming there is no truth at all. It's all relative. And that in itself has a kind of missionary zeal to it, which has, it really isn't, it doesn't feel like an absolutistic kind of crusade to get everyone to believe that everything is relative. And what I think is that there is a very big case for everything being relative, or a lot of things being relative, but not everything. So I think just by comparing cultures, we can see that a lot of the notions that we have in different cultures are relative to the context of the culture in which you grew up. But that doesn't mean that everything is relative. That doesn't mean that one plus one equals two is some kind of Eurocentric view on reality. I believe that there does exist such a thing as absolute truth. But really what belongs there is geometry and math.
The transcendentals.
And the transcendentals of truth, goodness, and beauty. That's what's absolutely true. All the rest is relative. But to claim that those absolutes don't even exist is a problem, because it leads directly to nihilism, which we can talk about in a minute. But I think it's important to point out that the claim that everything is relative is itself an absolutistic idea. It's a contradiction that we need to catch when it happens and say, wait a minute, we're going a little too far with that. We're throwing the baby out with the bathwater on that. Do you get where I'm coming from on that?
I do. Yeah, let me speak back to you on this. So I'm kind of thinking your assertion is that there's a kind of there's a value in our culture claiming that everything is relative. Like, so it's kind of like, well, the way you're seeing it is probably right for you, but the way I'm seeing it is probably right for me. You know, this is kind of like a value that we do here in our modern culture.
And there's certainly a place for that. And that's a very powerful way of looking at things, you know?
Yeah.
But to then claim that that is the only way to look at things is a problem.
Because you believe that when there are certain kind of heights you could go to if you want, or like unitive spaces in consciousness where you actually get access to some principles that are actually absolutely true. I'm trying to think of it. It's like if I'm looking at a rainbow, right, and I'm looking at a beautiful rainbow, and there's a gorgeous skyline, and it's out in the ocean, and I'm experiencing that. Like it's relative to me, that experience. I can't ever really know how you would experience, even if you're right there beside me. It could be different for you how you're experiencing
Let's
it.
say we both have a altered state experience, and
Yeah,
we don't need to really mention how we got there, because there's a
yeah,
lot of ways to do that.
sure.
But one way of looking at that is that that's just a hallucination that's relative to you,
Okay.
and it has no meaning at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just relative to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's actually a real landscape there that I've gone to and you've gone to, and we can verify that there's a reality to that transcends the individual. That would indicate that there's some kind of absolute reality there. There's something there. It's not just a personal hallucination relative to each individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm kind of getting there with you, but I'm probably I've probably still a bit to go to totally land this one, right?
Yeah.
So, like, say for example, well, one of the ideas I quite like is, in Carl Jung's model, of like the archetypal domain of the collective unconscious, So this is like where the archetypes, the one example I like to give is the archetype of the mother, the principle of motherness, like that. Everybody knows the principle of a mother, the gateway to the universe. It's a principle of existence that makes sense today. As much nobody can get into this trip of life without through the portal of the mother, if you like. And that's the same for people since the beginning of time. So that's like an archetypal construct which has a truth to it. Yeah. So it's not relative in that sense. It's truthful. And you could go a little bit further. You could then talk about like a geometric form, like an equilateral triangle. It has 60 degrees at each angle. And that's a truth. It's not like relative. It's not like I see it as 60 degrees, but you might see it as something else. It's 100% truthful, undeniable, the same for everyone across all times and all cultures. Yeah. So in that regard, a triangle isn't relative, actually, or an equilateral triangle, I mean. Am I kind of getting close?
Yeah, but you're kind of saying heretical ideas that to this kind of religion of relativism, because in that it would be more like, no, Geoff, the mother archetype is something that you're just hallucinating on, like, is there such a thing as an archetype? That may, well, in your experience, that's great. Good for you.
Okay. I get you. I have that said to me a lot.
Yeah.
But what about the triangle? Like, is that not kind of irrefutable in a way? Like, is that like an equilateral triangle?
I believe it is. And I think it's a great case to pull up and say, well, draw a triangle and like, explain to me how that's relative, please.
Yeah. I get you. This is what's lovely about geometry, because it does get you there. I'm just so I can go with that. Yeah, it's like these are kind of like, the things you've brushed up against in your life about like sort of the assumptions of the way we're trained to see the world today, essentially. And by calling out these assumptions, you're inviting the reader to sort of like to go, oh yeah, I kind of never really looked at that. I just sort of felt it around me almost. So you're almost bringing these out into the light before you embark upon the rest of the journey where you're going to go, because we nearly have to shake these things out of our system.
It's kind of like everything is relative is an idea that I want you to contemplate and start to think about, like, is that true? And if it isn't, what isn't relative? What is absolutely true, if anything? Can you identify something that is true? That we can agree on, no matter what political party we're in, for example. Can we all agree on an equilateral triangle? And I think we can.
Yeah. And there are some fundamental truths.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I get you. So therefore, everything is relative, but not everything.
Right.
Kind of.
Most things.
Yeah. Most things. I get you. Meaning is irrelevant. This is the next one.
So if we assume everything is relative.
This is a big one.
then whatever universal truths anyone asserts can be deconstructed and shown to be belief systems, also known as comforting illusions, which are relative products of the originating socio-cultural contexts. So meaning is irrelevant follows from the idea that everything is relative. It's a consequence of believing that everything is relative, because then meaning is relative to you. Like, Geoff, if you find meaning in those archetypes, well, more power to you, buddy. But I think it's a bunch of BS. You know?
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we get to next, is that meaning doesn't matter. But what I find the problem with that is that meaning is a core human drive, actually. We all try to find meaning. It's kind of the point of life, in a way, in my opinion, is this drive to understand what your life is, what all life is, what your place in life is. And if we don't address that, if we just say it's irrelevant, it leads to all kinds of dysfunction. So people tend to look for meaning in organized systems of belief, traditionally through religion, increasingly in disorganized systems of belief, which would be conspiracy theories, for example, in believing only in oneself, which would be narcissism, trying to find meaning on one's own, which is the process of seeking, or not believing in anything at all, which is nihilism. And so when people are left up onto their own devices, which the dominant paradigm really does, it just says meaning doesn't matter, you figure it out, we're not even going to talk about it, then people are kind of lost in all these different ways of trying to find meaning.
Can I jump in there a little bit, Scott? Just like with a sort of a courteous provocation, meaning like meaning is irrelevant, right? So there's things like everything is relative. I can go, you only have one life to live. I can go with consciousness is a hard problem. You know, the universe is independent of consciousness. All those I can kind of go, yep, I've definitely heard of those, you know, and they've definitely been around me as I've been growing up, you know, and I felt them. But I just want to sort of like to lean into this assumption of yours that meaning is irrelevant, you know, because I find that, like, I mean, everyone's looking for meaning, really. I think, you know, everyone's trying to get meaning into their life. You know, I mean, a lot of the evangelical, whatever cause you're fighting for in the world is all kind of the pursuit of meaning, you know, and standing up for what you believe in and blah, blah, blah.
But we can't agree. We can't ever agree on any type of pursuit of meaning. And it's up to each individual, because everything is relative. So
okay, I get this grows out of the, okay.
You know, you might find meaning in religion or conspiracy theories or narcissism or nihilism, or, you know, all these different roots, or seeking. These are all routes that I recognize different people are going on to find meaning. But there's no like roadmap. You're just left on your own. Like, good luck. Like, you were born and you never got the manual of life, you know, like, but maybe someone handed you a Bible and you're taking the religious path, or maybe you studied physics in university and you're on the kind of nihilism path or atheism path, or, you know, everybody's on a different path. Because everything is relative.
Is it like saying the pursuit of meaning is chaotic and fragmented? Would that be like, could I substitute the heading meaning is irrelevant with that? Meaning is chaotic. The pursuit of meaning is chaotic and fragmented.
It's because the dominant paradigm doesn't have a take on meaning. It's just like, we don't know. Meaning is irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
Okay, I get you. Okay, I'm with you.
And so we're left.
But a lot of people are pursuing
meaning
in a lot of places. I mean, because I see people really they really believe in stuff, and they're quite charged about it,
And
and I
more
always,
power to them. I mean, that's
yeah,
their own path, and I'm not
yeah,
here to
yeah,
stop them or even to suggest another one, really. But um, I think that my alternative conception of worldview does talk about meaning and teleology and causes,
yeah.
and it all comes from sacred geometry. So
Well, hey, I mean,
you
this
know,
is a big one for you and I. I mean, I think one of the sort of the real gems of the journey with geometry is that it really does begin to infuse your life with meaning and meaningfulness, where you begin to feel a sense of real deep meaning to this sacred lifetime that we have been
but that
gifted,
meaning is something that is relative to you,
Yeah,
to your life path.
yeah.
And I'm not proclaiming that I know the meaning of life or anything, but I'm
Of
just
course,
saying
I
that
know that.
probably a good place to look for that would be in some kind of absolute truth, like geometry,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you
I
know,
get you. I
rather than
get you.
following guru A or guru B or whatever.
Yeah, I'm
Why
with
don't
you.
we go right to the source and get the absolute truth of it? And then
Yeah,
maybe your higher self will give you a clue about that meaning, on your own,
nice,
you see.
nice.
And so it's not Scott and Geoff telling you what meaning is. It's about
Yeah,
us kind of guiding you to something quite beautiful and true. And then
you
hopefully,
form your meaning out of that.
you're going to get this direct connection with your inner self that will
Yeah,
give you that
beautiful.
meaning. And now that's a mysterious process. It's not up to me. I don't know where that's
And
coming
it's
from
different for
exactly.
everybody.
It's different for everybody. It's relative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But by
Yeah.
choosing to sort of, I don't know, meditate upon or whatever, but or study the transcendentals or the pure truths, it's a good choice in
I
an
think so.
otherwise
Yeah.
chaotic universe of options,
Yeah, exactly.
you know.
And then we have just one more topic here in the chapter, which is ignorance is strength. And this is actually a
Yeah.
George Orwell idea, right? That it's one of those
Okay.
kind of statements like war is peace or ignorance is strength. And it kind
Yeah.
of comes from my own take on, my half century of life on the planet and seeing how it seems like people are getting increasingly dumbed down by the dominant paradigm. And I find that alarming. And when I think about, like, in the 19th century, how people were made to study Latin and Greek and Euclid's elements, and they ended up being quite intelligent, generally, if they were fortunate enough to get an education, that is. But today you don't see that very often, and more often you just see people not even wanting to learn anything, because why would they want to do that? It's on their smartphone, they can just look it up.
Yeah.
So they don't actually pattern their own brains, they just rely upon the dominant paradigms, Google, to give you that.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite dangerous, in that, like, for example, in democracy, it requires a certain level of cognition in its citizens to want to vote and to participate. And I don't want to get political, but I'm just noticing that we've kind of fallen below a certain threshold there that would allow that kind of idea to continue, maybe, because
Mm-hmm.
people are not attracted to learning as much as they used to be. And I don't know, this might just be my own take on what's happened in my own kind of curmudgeon middle-aged
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
look
It's
at it. But I think this
when
is kind of one of those dominant
when I
paradigm
first saw
things.
saw this one, I hope I'm not giving you too hard a time on chapter 3, Scott. You know what I mean? Like, it's, how much a fan I am of all your work, but when I first saw ignorance is strength, and then I tried to place that in a claim that this is a value of the modern paradigm, I had to go, let me think about that, because I don't know whether I come up against ignorance is strength. It's not something that everything is relative. Is something I've definitely come across a lot. People say that to me over and over again, but ignorance is strength, it's not as familiar to me. But speaking to you actually over, over our conversations, as you've really explained this one to me, and I really quite like your taking it. So it's this idea that, you know, we now have so many tools available to us that kind of make our lives more convenient and more efficient and more speedy. And, you know, these conveniences are helpful. You know, if you want to order food from your phone, it's no problem, you know, but there's also a loss in that. And I'm reminded of, let me know if this point gets close to what you're claiming here, right? But there's a lovely book written by Jaron Lanier, right? The Future of Everything, amazing book. He's this VR guy from Silicon Valley, but he made a claim somewhere about like the value of craft, right? And like artisan workmanship, right? So for example, things like, say, like blacksmiths back in the day, when everybody was on horses, blacksmiths was like a real prestigious kind of, like, you had a high social standing because you had to form the hoofs for like the transport system of the time, you know. And it's quite an art actually to be a blacksmith, you know, to create with the precision. But then say the automobile gets invented and like new ways of getting around and so we're not really dependent on the blacksmith in the way we used to be, right? And so the dominant paradigm could easily say, oh, who needs a blacksmith? Who needs horseshoes? Forget about that. That's a waste of time, you know? But what we're doing there is like we're throwing out this incredible, you know, resource in the craftsmanship that has been cultivated over hundreds of years, you know. And so his point was that, you know, it's now all about having, he was making a point about social media, I think at the time, it's all about having like 100,000 followers on a platform or whatever, but nobody's saying I can't do that, but I can make a really good horseshoe. You know, is your claim is like, you know, that the idea of like retaining some of the kind of the ancient arts are very, very valuable. And if we throw them out, we kind of like, we cut our nose off to spite our face.
It's even more than like retaining the beautiful craft of blacksmithing. It's more like, can you find France on a map? You know, like if you like, and why would that be important? I mean, I just chose France randomly, but what I mean is do you have knowledge in your own brain at all, or is it always dependent on your smartphone?
I get you. Yeah.
I think it's very alarming. Like, what if the internet goes down?
Yeah.
What if we have some kind of interruption in civilization, like a comet hits or some kind of thing like that? How many people would be able to rebuild from first principles?
I get you.
How many people would be able to even rediscover blacksmithing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know that. I don't know how to make a horseshoe.
Yes. You know? Yeah, I don't either. I'm not. Yeah.
But there should be people that know this stuff, and it's not just online.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
And I think the dominant paradigm is it alarms me.
I get you.
In this area.
This is what you mean by this. I totally get you. Yeah. And I think it's a brilliant point, Scott, actually. I really like this point, you know. Ignorance is strength. It doesn't instantly come out into my understanding that way, but having trashed it out with you here, it's I love the point, and it's something I really feel strongly about myself, you know. I kind of find that you know, we have this fabulous electrical network inside our craniums, you know, the most sophisticated machinery in the universe, arguably. And if we run, you know, algorithms on our smartphones, you know, through our brains for hours and hours a day, we're just kind of carving out these kind of like grooves, which are very homogenous. Everybody on the same algorithm is more or less carving out the same groove in their brain. And there's a great freedom in something like learning an instrument. I just do a little bit of, like, for a hobby, some drumming, for example, right? but it's almost become like an antidote to the conditioning of my smartphone, if you like, because when you have to learn something from inside, you can feel your brain struggle. It's like, you're trying to get somewhere that you're not yet. And it takes practice, and it takes a lot of effort actually, until, now I have that rhythm. It's now in my being,
I think that
and
that journey towards virtuosity in your instrument it's really the value of that is that journey. It's not
agreed.
the knowledge of the instrument, which you could watch a YouTube video and learn some knowledge. But what it's about is that journey that you go on that patterns your brain and makes you a more virtuous person in your journey towards virtuosity. There's a benefit of the acquisition of knowledge, the journey of that. It's not the knowledge, it's not the data itself.
Absolutely. It's like, I also feel there's something very satisfying in actually getting to a place where previously I didn't have this rhythm in my system, and now I feel I've accomplished something, or it's now in me, something that wasn't in me. I've now kind of acquired or accomplished or generated. I don't know how to say it, but it's a very satisfying feeling, is the point I'm trying to make, much more satisfying than scrolling on Twitter for an hour, to tell you the truth. It takes me longer than an hour to get a pattern into my system, by the way. But I'm a novice drummer. So I'm really loving this. This kind of brings us to the end of chapter 3 then, Scott, does it?
Yeah, and this chapter wasn't meant to be an exhaustive survey of it all about the dominant paradigm, but just I threw out those different nuggets for you to consider, that there may be different ways of looking at these assumptions that we have in the dominant paradigm, and how we already know how my theory kind of collides with that in saying that there's another domain of mathematical and geometric entities that exists outside of this whole system, and that would be a disagreement with the dominant paradigm. And so I kind of brought all these up to give you ideas about how the dominant paradigm doesn't really explain everything, and there's a space for looking at everything in a different way. And so that's kind of a good primer for the next part of the book. The next 3 chapters are all about explaining that framework that I have.
It's a fantastic setting of the stage, if you like. I found chapter 3 really helpful to kind of even just to consider again, some of these assumptions that are so prevalent in our modern worldview, if you like, So I'm just thinking part 2, a new way of thinking. This unified alternative worldview is experienced as 3 simultaneous philosophical streams in the ontology, which is chapter 4, epistemology, which is chapter 5, and teleology in chapter 6. Then, taken together, this trinity comprises of a new way of thinking. So that's where we're on our way to from here. We'll dive deeply into those in the coming chapters. I'm looking forward to it. So thanks, Scott. I hope that was fun for our viewers as well. And if you've watched the video this far, thanks for joining us. See you in the next one. Bye.